the big news of the week. As shocking as it was to see Kyrie's name on that cut list last week, this takes the cake here as the biggest shocker of all of them. The New Day. Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods gone from WWE. Second longest reigning tag team champions on the main WWE roster in history, behind only the Usos. And two guys who I figured were as close to lifers in that company as you're ever going to find. Of course, we know, especially in the TKO era, there's no such thing as a lifer. They don't exist. They're like those unicorns that the New Day used to talk about. But truly, New Day will go down as one of the most successful, not even just tag team acts, but just successful groups in WWE history. Their longevity is unmatched. Even the Usos broke up there for a while, and they're actual brothers. New Day stayed together for well over a decade, since 2014. They made that company a lot of money, a lot of merch money. The Kofi Mania story in 2019 was great. The payoff was great, winning the WWE title at WrestleMania. I mean, that story kind of came out of nowhere. Didn't end well for Kofi Kingston, but, he could always say that he won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. How many people can say that? Not too many. His name is on a very elite list now, a list that includes names like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and The Ultimate Warrior and Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Rock, I guess, would have been on that list had he won the belt at 16 and not at Backlash. Yeah, shockingly, The Rock is 0 for 4 in title matches at WrestleMania. But Triple H is on there, Daniel Bryan, John Cena, Cody Rhodes. All of these men have won that title at WrestleMania, and Kofi's name will forever be on that list. Kofi signed with them in 2006, so 20 years ago. Woods, he had been there since 2010. Big E was a very big part of what made the New Day work. And ever since he got dropped on his head and he was forced into an early retirement, New Day has never been the same. They kept it going, but it just wasn't going to work with anybody else. So once they dropped, and look, we can go back to when it looked like they were going to be adding Odyssey Jones, and obviously that went nowhere because they got rid of Odyssey Jones. Would that have gone on to become some big success? Would he have been able to successfully take that third spot in the group? Probably not. Looking at WWE creative, probably not. We'll never know. But it was just never going to be the same. So once they just became a tag team only and not a trio, it just lost a lot of its luster. But also the longer, that things go on for, people get tired of it. It doesn't hit quite the same way anymore when you're doing the same shtick over and over again, unless you change it, if you evolve it, maybe you go from babyface to heel. Something has to change. I mean, you look at characters that have stood the test of time in that company I mentioned The Undertaker before. To his credit, The Undertaker, who had been there forever, as an active performer, he did change. He evolved his character. And I'm not just talking babyface to heel to babyface. He evolved over the years. If you don't evolve, you die eventually. And so that was also a problem with the New Day. It's like you get tired of the same shtick after a while if you don't change it up. But then came the heel turn. At the end of 2024, they were celebrating 10 years of the New Day. And they turned it into a pissing contest about how abandoned they felt by Big E after he got hurt, and how he wasn't there for them. And because they had been having all these issues, and it looked like Kofi and Woods were headed for a big breakup, a big fight. And then they just turned around and blamed it all on Big E, which was a stretch. I'm not going to say that it was some great storyline. I mean, it wasn't a great story, but they were able to take that and generate a ton of heat using Big E. They found a way to use Big E to get heat on Kofi and Woods. And so it made for great TV that night. It was a different side of the New Day that we hadn't seen before. It was a more serious side. Like, finally, we're going to drop the silliness that had kind of played itself out and get a little more serious here. It was time for a fresh coat of paint. And I thought for sure this meant that Big E was either cleared or they thought he was about to get cleared. And they were building to something with him at WrestleMania. That return never came, because Big E was not cleared. And Big E, in fact, is retired, and he will never wrestle again. Not only was he not cleared, but they clearly had no plans on how to follow up on such a hot angle, and they let it fizzle out. One of the great fumbles of the Levesque administration They can come up with a great idea, but they don't know how to follow up with it and stick the landing. They know how to execute the initial idea and not much else after that. That happened in December of 2024. Not even 3 months later, they turned John Cena heel. And the same thing, hot opening angle, absolutely no good idea on how to follow up on it, and it sucked. That is his greatest fumble, is the John Cena heel turn. The New Day turn isn't too far behind that. And looking back at it now that I talk about it, like, because they happen so close together, you know what? They would have been better off pairing New Day up with John Cena. Like, all the good guys are suddenly Breaking Bad. You know, they could have had a similar, similar motivations where they felt like people had turned their backs on them. I wouldn't call them lackeys for Cena, but I guess you could kind of look at it that way. But it would have put Kofi and Woods in a much more prominent position on the show, and on those weeks where John Cena wasn't there. Because remember, he only had, 36 dates? Then they could have stood in for him like the Usos do when Roman isn't around. But see, this would have required some actual forethought to be put into it. And I don't get the sense there's a whole lot of advanced planning going on when they come up with some of these ideas. Like, they get really excited about it. Like, hey, we got this great idea. And again, they can execute it, but then they have no idea what to do next. It's like the dog catching the car. Now what? Didn't help that the tag team division is dead in this company and clearly is not a priority for them. You know, New Day had not had a PLE match together since WrestleMania last year. And the only reason they even got that was because their match was tied into a video game sponsorship that they had. You remember that? It was them against the Viking Raiders, and there was some fucking game. I don't remember what it was. Literally the only reason that match even made the WrestleMania card last year, because at the time, it would have made a lot more sense for the SmackDown team. SmackDown was killing it in the tag team division. And I remember looking at this going, wait a minute, you put the Raw tag team title match on the WrestleMania card and you bumped the SmackDown guys to television. And it didn't make any sense until you realize, no, they had a video game sponsorship. That's why they got on the show. So what the hell happened here? Well, Brian Alvarez is reporting that in the case of the New Day, it was their decision to leave. Only after TKO came to them about restructuring their existing contracts. Evidently, they didn't like those deals that were being offered to them, and they did not agree to this, and instead they requested their release, and it was granted. And per Fightful, the belief is that they had just signed brand new contracts last year, which were not due to expire until 2030. So their deals weren't even up. They were still in year one of a 5-year deal for each of them, and it sounds like TKO wanted them to take a pay cut. And they said, no, we're going to take our business elsewhere. Thank you very much. Now, please let us go. And so they're bound by the same 90-day period that anybody else on the main roster would be if they were given their release. Again, it's technically a 90-day notice of termination. They will still be paid for those 90 days, at which point they will be free to sign wherever they wish. Kofi and Woods, I mean, look, they make well into the 7-figure range. They were being paid a lot. And they were doing very little on TV. So it's very possible that WWE and TKO looked at the roster and they saw the New Day and they said, well, we're not getting a lot of return on our investment here. Whose fault is that? It's not their fault. It's not a failure of the New Day. I'm sure if it were up to the New Day, they'd book themselves in fucking multiple segments on the show every single week. That's the failure of WWE and TKO. You signed these men to top dollar contracts, and you treated them like bottom dollar bitches who you would parade out there most of the time during commercial breaks. And if that's all you were going to do with them, then you shouldn't have signed them for that much money in the first place. It's not like TKO just acquired the company last year. We're in year 3 now of this new ownership. Why were they offered so much money to re-sign if they had no plans for them? Why was Santos Escobar, who rejected their offers to re-sign and allowed his contract to expire last year, why was he offered so much more money to lure him back in, only for them to fire him 6 months later? At a time, mind you, when he is out injured after 2 surgeries, since the first one apparently got botched up, he had to go under the knife for a second time. Why is no thought put into how they actually plan to utilize these talents before signing them, instead of just throwing money at them just to keep them from leaving and going somewhere else? and then giving them the thought that they had some level of job security, only to turn around and say, you know what, on second thought, we don't want to pay you that much money. Goodbye. But this is how Endeavor operates. Look at what happened when they bought the UFC. They fired Chuck Liddell and Matt Hughes, 2 UFC Hall of Famers who Dana White put on the payroll after they retired. He put them in some kind of executive position. It was largely ceremonial, but it was like their way of saying thank you for your service. And as soon as Endeavor took over, they were shit canned. They were the first on the chopping block. They don't care about that sort of thing. It is purely business for them. They don't care how long you've been there. They don't care what your contributions have been or how well liked you may be with your peers or the fans. You know, the sweat equity that you've put in. They don't give a shit. This isn't the first time that somebody in the history of wrestling has been asked to renegotiate their deal in the middle of their contract. I mean, that's not like it's not exclusive to Endeavor or TKO. I mean, sometimes it works the other way. And if somebody gets super over or the company is really happy with the work they're putting out, they may be asked to renegotiate at a higher salary so they can lock them in for more years. That's what happened just recently in AEW with Tekla. I think she was 1 year into what may have been a 3-year deal, and apparently Tony Khan went to her and said, hey, want to offer you more money and lock you in for longer. So she signed a higher money deal. She was maybe a year into her existing one. So it can go the other way too, although that's rare. I mean, usually you hear about it, it's the other way around. I mean, Bret Hart was famously asked to renegotiate the 20-year contract that he signed with Vince McMahon. He was a year in on a 20-year deal. Times were tough for WWE in 1997, so he went to Bret, and he asked Bret to, restructure his deal in a way that would defer a lot of the money that he was owed to the back end of the deal. Basically take a pay cut for a while, and Bret told him to go kick rocks. And he was right. I mean, think about it. Put yourself in his shoes. If times are that tough and things are very dire, and the company was very close in 97 at one point to having to file for bankruptcy, and your boss comes to you and says, hey, about that deal that you signed last year, all that money you're owed, why don't we defer that to the back end of the deal, right? You don't even know if the company's going to be around a year from now. You may not end up getting that money. You'd have to be an idiot to say yes to that. I don't blame him for saying no. He told him to go kick rocks, as was his right. So Vince gave him permission to go negotiate with WCW. He goes, look, I'm going to have to breach your contract, and I'll give you permission to go negotiate with Turner, which is what he did. And then all of a sudden, which Bret didn't want to do, but then he signed with them, got himself a sweetheart deal. And then after that, all of a sudden, Vince came back to him and said, hey, you know what? We've turned things around. No need to worry. I can afford to pay you. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? I already signed with them. But these things, they become a lot easier to understand when you realize that they don't really care about you. That's why Vince famously never liked to deal with lawyers or agents. I want to deal with the talent directly. I don't like lawyers. I don't like agents. Of course he doesn't. He's the fucking head of the company. No CEO loves to deal with lawyers or agents. Because with your lawyer or your agent, their priority is you, not your employer. They're supposed to look out for your best interests. Your employer's goal is to look out for their own best interests. You're a distant number two. So when you think about it like that, these things become a little bit easier to understand. Make no mistake, New Day chose to walk, not because they didn't want to be there, but because WWE didn't want them there anymore bad enough. Because if they did, they never would have asked them to restructure their deals in the first place, knowing that this would likely be the end result. Now they can say, well, they chose to leave. We didn't fire them, which is technically true, but I mean, it's still bullshit. Well, the way I see it, this is the best thing that could have happened to those two guys. Honestly, now they have the freedom to control their own destiny, and they are going to clean up. Like PW Insider says, there's already a lot of excitement, as I'm sure there is, in AEW about the possibility of them coming in. We've already seen a number of AEW talents on social media posting all sorts of things about New Day. Even MJF was like, oh, it's a New Day. Yes, it is. They're all excited about this. The New Day against the Young Bucks. I mean, are you kidding me? That's a dream match for those two teams. They've been talking about it for years. Kenny Omega has wanted to work with those guys for a long time. I don't remember what video game convention it was, something Street Fighter related probably, but they all ended up in the same place once a few years ago doing video game shit. And everybody was losing their minds about it. Like, oh my God, one day this is going to be a dream match. Well, guess what? That dream is about to become a reality. They have contracts ready and waiting for them. All they need to do is put pen to paper after their 90 days are up. And just in time for Wembley Stadium, by the way. That's a no-brainer to me. You add in the Motor City Machine Guns, and WWE just did more for Tony Khan's tag team division than they did for Nick Khan's. The WWE tag team division is dead. 2 sets of tag belts for a division that if you were to merge them together from Raw and SmackDown would still be near the bottom of the all-time list of worst tag team divisions in history. Meanwhile, AEW could be looking at a division in a few months that has the Young Bucks, the New Day, FTR, the Motor City Machine Guns, the Hurt Syndicate, and about half a dozen other teams. I can't even name them all right now. Not to mention for New Day, you got the independent circuit, you've got the gaming conventions. I mean, think of all the things that these guys are going to have the freedom to start doing in a few months. WWE did these 2 guys a favor. They should send Ari Emanuel and Mark Shapiro a gift basket full of bootios. Instead of wasting away the rest of their careers in ad breaks on Netflix, they'll actually be able to write their own ending to their story. Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, though, they chose to leave. 2 men who did not choose to leave, as far as we know. But they are, in fact, on their way out. You can add them to the cut list, are JC Mateo and Tonga Loa. Yes, the great Tonga Loa, gone from WWE. Tala Tonga, he missed SmackDown last week. That wasn't a good sign, but apparently he was in concussion protocol, which is why he was back on the show this week. But the MFTs were down to 2 on Friday. I don't know where Tama Tonga was on Friday night, but we had Solo Sikoa and we had Tala Tonga on SmackDown wrestling the Usos in the main event of SmackDown, because of course they did. It's not enough to have the key storyline on Mondays. We need more Bloodline lore on Fridays, because this company is devoid of any fresh ideas. Look, you know my thoughts on the MFTs. The group was very boring. Their feud with the Wyatts was boring. It made for boring, terrible television. But that is how WWE chose to present them and utilize them on TV. Jeff Cobb debuted with them last year at Backlash. So he fell just short of 1 full year on TV. And you mean to tell me that in that year that Jeff Cobb was with this company, this is the best they could come up with for the guy? I'm not saying he was lighting it up on TV every week with his charismatic personality. If it was there, he never got a chance to show it. But slapping that dumb face paint on him and keeping him as a mute was not going to get him over. What got him over in New Japan or in Lucha Underground, where they put him under a mask, was his work in the ring. In WWE, there's more of an emphasis on characters and personalities and promo time. He never even got that. So I was excited to see what he could do when he first came in, like with guys like Sheamus and Drew McIntyre and Bronson Reed and Sami Zayn and Penta and so on. He had 1 match with LA Knight in his street clothes, his first match in, a match with R-Truth, and 2 fucking matches with Jimmy Uso. That's it. In 1 year, that was it. The entire year he was there. The rest were tag matches with the MFTs, most of which came against the Wyatts. That is how Jeff Cobb spent his 1 and only year in WWE. But I also pointed out when the rumors first started flying last year about the possibility of him signing with the company, how, he was 42 years old. Right now he would be 43, I think going on 44 this July. And for him, it may have been a now or never type of deal where, and I think the Motor City Machine Guns would fall into the same category. Why did they choose WWE over AEW? Even though AEW seemed like it would be a better fit, right? They never worked for WWE, and they're not getting any younger. It's now or never, right? I have to try this, because if I don't want to look back years from now and say, man, what could have been? I missed my shot to see how I would do in WWE. And it may have been that way for Jeff Cobb as well. He tried it. It didn't work out. But he's going to have plenty of opportunities out there for him after these 90 days are up. He moved from Japan to the United States. I don't know that he would want to move back there. I know he lived over there for 7 or 8 years. So I don't know if a full-time return to New Japan would be in the cards for him. But AEW does have the working relationship with New Japan. If he ends up there, he could still work some New Japan dates if he wants to. Tonga Loa, he debuted at Backlash in 2024, in spectacular fashion. Okay, he didn't get out from under the ring fast enough to break up one of the near falls in the match. I mean, what can I say? You can't be surprised by this. I was surprised when they first brought him back. And good for him. He got a short run out of it. But, this never felt to me like it was going to be a long-term thing.